Hey guys, so just jumping right into it. Obviously, the major thing with this episode is Yaoyorozu's development as a leader, but even more so than that, I feel the biggest thing that this episode touched on in that regard is Momo's feelings of how even after the end of term final exam where she was forced to face Aizawa, she's still in her own ways pretty much battling this pretty much sense of insecurity. With pretty much Aizawa is more or less her doubts as a hero and individual, where here uh, in facing Kendo, what's been spotlighted is Momo's doubts stem from her ability as a leader. And in her mind, whether she knew it or not, she was almost kind of projecting those fears and insecurities through Kendo, who she had perceived as the more confident, the more capable version of herself, and just overall a version of herself she kind of wanted to be as a leader. Of course, compared to what happened during the term exam, I also like how this episode it didn't shy away either from pretty much showing us that Prince Momo still pretty much did learn to pretty much think on her feet and adapt to a situation at hand, because it shows that even she is still insecure. Even if she is still insecure about her leadership abilities, she's still taking from those experiences and applying them to how she functions as a leader, which is shown in this episode. How from the very moment this mock battle started, she had already had a plan. It was just up to everyone else though as to whether or not it would work. And as we pretty much know, it didn't work, but it was pretty much, when you really look at this plan, it was basically a flawless plan, but pretty much because of a single miscalculation, it pretty much failed. So yeah, Momo's abilities as a leader are definitely, as Midnight points out, Momo's leader's ability are astounding at this point, and it's really worth mentioning. And like and this is something I really love how Momo's character, a lot of Momo's character, how with Momo's character, a lot of her character arc and just overall development is her battling her own insecurities and self worth. Because it is honestly, when it comes to the idea of insecurities and just how you deal with them, it is something that everyone deals with in one form or another practically every day. But with Momo, it's just elevated in this sense. Of course, Momo isn't. It wasn't just Momo overcoming her own insecurities. Kenda was also dealing with her own as well in this episode, because, as we learned, ever since the internship ever since the internship with Uwabami, Kendo has been kind of silently, almost kind of competing with Momo and try to like, overcome this very thin gap of constantly being compared to her when she when and because of the constantly being compared to Momo, it just the frustration within Kendo, it kept building inside of her to the point where she, obviously on the surface she obviously had a kind and very just and very conversational personality, and very, very easygoing personality, but on the surface she was keeping a lot of those frustrations inside, because underneath the surface of her more kinder attitude, she pretty much just Kendo just wanted to be her, just wanted to be recognized. Being constantly compared to Momo, she just wanted to be recognized for her own capabilities and skills. And at the core of this fight, Kendo basically saw the opportunity to show she's not only a better fighter than Momo, but it would allow her to stand on her own. And these are actually the kind of rival fights I live for, the ones where both characters respect each other, but they still feel the need to like best the other in order to show that they are their own person with their own strengths, and that sets them apart and are worth recognition as an individual. And it is an interesting dynamic with how both Momo and Kendo did feel like even though they both respect each other's abilities, they both also felt like they were living in each other's shadow. Because just like with Momo's feelings of insecurity, it is a constant battle in life to be recognized for your own abilities and efforts, rather than to be compared to others. And that's kind of this battle that, in the same way that Momo was battling her insecurities, Kendo was battling for recognition, and it was battling for just the recognition and being able to be recognized for those abilities. Now, again, obviously the thing to talk about is how, despite the strategy coming across as flawless, Class B still won in the end. And honestly, I love how, even though Class B won, Kendo still acknowledges that it didn't feel like a real victory. And the thing is, she's not exactly wrong. If it wasn't for that single miscalculation for that single miscalculation, then yeah, Class 1A would have won this battle. So yeah, I like how, even though Class B was the victor in this set battle, no one really felt like they came out as the victor or the winner, and really both. And at the end of the day, both Class A and B are pretty much like they've come out of this battle acknowledging failure, and now they're going to do a lot of reflection on how, in terms of how they think they can improve going forward. So yeah, I really liked this I really like the battle in this sense. And so, and for the most part, now I guess the one other thing to talk about uh, is that for the most part, I have defended a lot of the choices made by Bones, and when it comes to how they've extended this arc, but because obviously so far that they've added more than a couple things that I feel did add to the story that weren't in the manga. But this episode is the one time where I do have to jump on board with the consensus that this is an episode, for me at least, where extending the episode didn't entirely work this time. I mean, if they had added anything new or just done little touches like previous episodes, I'd be saying the same thing I did previously, or just not mention it at all. But because they padded this episode out with more than with more than its pretty much fair share of recap, it did somewhat detract from the experience a little bit. Now, it was still well placed recap, but recap nonetheless. And it is episodes like this that does make me realize Bones, I think, did in some ways have to sacrifice this arc in certain aspects, for the purpose of making sure everything after this looks amazing. Because trust me, even though this arc might seem a little tedious, trust me, things pretty much jump into goddamn overdrive in the next two arcs that supposedly this season is going to cover. So yeah. The one thing I will say though is, despite the problem of pacing in this episode, we are still burning through this arc a lot faster than the manga, and I think again it's probably just the whole thing of having to wait a week from week to week in order to read these, but in order to read the chapters. But yeah, compared to reading this in the manga, it's still a lot more of an easier like run through, frankly, than compared to in the anime, honestly. And now let's talk about Tokoyami in this episode, because as we pretty much see, he was pretty much the star of this episode, with how he had pretty much used, he not only used everything that he learned from Hawks in order to capture like Prince Komori and whatever his name is, the shadow guy. But so it's like one of those things where he not only used everything he learned from Hawks, but I absolutely love how he had also used just the most simplest and bare bones basic of tools in order to actually capture them, using the infrared goggles and the fungal spray. I just absolutely love that, because I think it really kind of enforces another certain theme that's been throughout this series, which is the idea that you don't always need like flashy powers in order to overcome the most simplest of obstacles. It's like sometimes using the most simplest of tools, simplest of gadgets can pretty much work wonders over any powers. And in a lot of ways, this episode was a showcase of that. It was thanks to the infrared goggles that he was able to capture. That he was able to capture Komori and the Shadow Guy to begin with, because it blocks out everything else from sight. So yeah, I really like the application of this. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, Like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Twitter, Analyst, Crunchyroll, and be sure to like, and hit the bell for notifications. Dead Night of Anime, signing off. Later, guys.